This season of So You Want to Run a Restaurant is brought to you by Localizer.
In today's market, the difference between a full house and an empty one is discoverability. And Localizer makes sure your restaurant actually gets found.
Yeah, by making it easy to manage all your online reviews, you'll boost your ranking on Google, Yelp, and even the top delivery apps. And more visibility means more customers walking through your door.
Turn your great reputation into real growth. And as an added bonus, listeners of this show get a 25% off discount on your first 3 months.
Learn how at localizer.com/podcast. That's LOCALYSER.com/podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Sarek.
And I'm Spencer Michael.
And this is So You Want to Run a Restaurant, created by the team at backofhouse.io, the most trusted resource for restaurant tech. Today, we've got not one, but two incredible guests joining us from New York City's most storied dining rooms.
That's right. We're talking about the Lambs Club, which sits in historic Stanford White Building in New York City's Midtown area. It's a total haunt for Broadway legends, film stars, New York's cultural movers and shakers. For more than a century, it's been there. And now it's being reimagined for a new era by today's guests, executive chef and partner Jack Logue and managing partner Chris Miller.
Yes, Jack is a Michelin-trained chef who grew up in New York, left business school to study in Italy, and built a career across some of the world's top kitchens before returning home to put his stamp on the Lambs Club. So he's all about balancing tradition and innovation, making fine dining feel both timeless, but also fresh and new for some of the new generation that's coming in.
And alongside him is Chris Miller, who comes from the front of house side. He's a wine expert, seasoned hospitality professional for more than 2 decades in the industry, and Chris has worked in just about every single role in a restaurant you can imagine. Welcome to the show, Jack and Chris.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, you guys. We're so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
thank you.
What's really cool about you guys' combined experience is that you kind of embody the full spectrum of what makes restaurants work and work really, really well. So you've got the craft in the kitchen, and then you've got the hospitality in the floor. And now you're both leading one of New York's most iconic dining rooms, but you come from totally different sides of the restaurant world. So I'd love us to start with each of you taking us back to the moment you first really fell in love with restaurants. What was that spark that really said, this is where I want to build my career and this is the industry I want to work in?
Yeah, so it's funny. And both Chris and I got started in the restaurant industry very, very early on.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that spark happened at a young age. I started working at my granddaddy's farms in Kentucky. Those were like my first summer jobs and things like that. And I'd go to camp or go to hockey camp or stuff like that. And then I was like a counselor in camps. And then one year I was like, okay, like maybe this isn't like no more camp. I'm like 16 years old. Like maybe I should get like a different type of job. My friend had a couple of my parents' mother, had a couple of restaurants on the Upper East Side, and I started as a dishwasher, and I would, be a busboy and just like learned like sort of how this whole industry worked. And then for me, it was one summer, and this is like the most dichotomous Upper East Side kid thing ever, but like one summer I was working at Citigroup Investment Bank by day, like on Wall Street, like computer programming, and at night I would be a busboy and our bartender in his mom's restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And like I just saw like the path so clearly at that moment where like, okay, this is the desk job. It's great, sort of easy. It's cushy. I'm bored half the time, but you make a lot of money. And then there's this other thing where it's challenging and it's teamwork, and reminded me of all the sports I'd played, because like every single person's super important. There's no one who's less important than anyone else, because if someone doesn't do their job, the whole team fails. You're engaging with humans, you're engaging with people, with guests. Like I was just enthralled with it. And that was sort of like when I knew that restaurants were like, it had all the energy and all the buzz and all the things that I loved, but also more importantly, like the opportunity to give people amazing experiences. Ironically, now we spend a lot of time at the desk, but you can't tell. Yeah. And so for me, it was pretty simple. So when I went to college very briefly in Boulder, Colorado, I was in a lot of business classes. I was like the focus. At the time, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, whatever that means to a 18-year-old kid. Like, It's like, yeah, that sounds like a great career, entrepreneur. Like, let's do
I want to work for myself, and then you realize how hard it is to be your own boss.
Yeah, it's like I have no idea what that actually means at the time, right? And I would go into all these business classes, and the same thing was said in every single class. It was the first rule about business is know your product inside and out. And I remember at the time, Chipotle was just starting. and the CEO of Chipotle had come to be a guest speaker, and their biggest competition was Qdoba at the time, right? This is Boulder, Colorado in 2005. And he was telling the story about how, in order to beat Qdoba and in order to be considered the better brand, he went down to Mexico and he learned how to make burritos from this one family, just one family, but he learned how to do it the way that they did it. Now, I'm not saying Chipotle is like the most authentic Mexican food in the world, but like
Sure.
for him, that was super important. And, I heard that, and basically a week later, I dropped out of college and made a plan to get into a culinary school in Italy and moved to Italy when I was 18. And it sort of just all started from there and kicked off from there.
Oh, good for you. Wow. Well, that's a great
Thanks.
story. I love that. That's awesome. I can imagine the office that you're in now is a stark difference in the office you're in finance. The
Yeah, so
the beautiful view of the New York skyline is to probably a brick wall if I've ever been in a restaurant.
Although I don't,
you've got it correct.
yeah, investment banking though, I feel like there's got to be similarities from the hustle of investment banking and the hustle of a restaurant. So you took something with you, right?
Absolutely. And, the funny thing is now 20 years later, Chris and I have now grown into, being more on that side and opening up new projects and working on new things in the future and, figuring out where to get capital from. And so it sort of has come full circle for me. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. How about you, Chris? Where did the spark kick off for you?
Yeah, interesting. I grew up in central New Jersey in like a very blue collar town near Princeton, about an hour from the city.
Mm-hmm.
So I started my first ever job actually was at this little children's museum called the Wonder Museum, and they would host like little children's birthday parties. And I was a party host. My sister had worked there, so she got me the job. And you end up. It was like the same food for the entire party. You bring out the food, you pour the juice, you cut the cake and sing happy birthday. It was actually pretty lucrative. I was 15 years old. And back then, it was probably $20 a kid or $25 a kid. And sometimes you would have up to 25 or 30 kids. So the bills would be $300 or $400 bills. You'd be making $120 in cash plus $6 an hour was the minimum wage back then. I was making like serious money for a 15-year-old.
Oh, yeah. And you don't have Uncle Sam coming after you. So it's like even better.
No, that was under the table.
Oh, yeah.
And then the girl who drove me to school, I was a sophomore. She was a junior. She was like, hey, I work at this restaurant, and if I bring someone to work for the restaurant, I get $100 and I'll give you 50 of it. And I'm like, well, I already have a job. She's like, yeah, but you can make $50. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I started off as a food runner. So I think I just like built kind of a work ethic, and it was always fun for me. So I ended up working there from when I was 16 till 25. I was a food runner, became a bar back, became a server, became a bartender. And we just had this like unbelievable group of bartenders. And it was all about hospitality and taking care of people. It was a very Cheers type atmosphere where you see the person walking from the parking lot, you see the person get out of their car, and you put their drink on the bar, and it's like there. And it was really just like a really cool experience. So that's kind of how I got the bug. And I kind of just knew at that point this was going to be what I was going to do the rest of my life.
Awesome. So let's move to where you're both working now at the Lambs Club. And it's a legendary restaurant and place to eat in New York City. So for listeners who may be outside of New York City and not totally familiar with the Lambs Club, just briefly go through the bit of the history of the Lambs Club and kind of the vision you have, because what you're doing is you're balancing this honored tradition of a restaurant that's been there for so long, an institution, but you're also making it relevant for today and reinventing what the Lambs Club is. So,
I should backtrack to, a little bit post-COVID where I met Jack, actually. I came back on as the GM. I was the wine director before COVID, actually. So a different management company took over the restaurant. I came back as the GM. They figured I'd had experience with the property and I could be helpful. Jack came on as the chef de cuisine. And, so me and Jack kind of just were very magnetic towards each other because we had kind of grown up in the New York City hospitality world, like on separate paths. And we were kind of having these parallel trajectories, rising the ranks in New York City, and we come together and it's kind of just like, magnetic. We just like got it and we understood like what each other wanted to do. And so, the Lambs Club is an iconic place, very Art Deco when you walk into this like really, really beautiful hotel lobby. And it's crazy because it's right in the middle of Times Square pretty much, off of 44th Street. You could throw a rock and hit what was a Good Morning America scroll right there. And you come into this restaurant and it's just a safe haven. You just completely forget you're in the middle of Times Square and you're just like in this really, really nice, beautiful restaurant, beautiful big leather banquettes, red leather seats, just really, really great dining room.
Yeah. So, and I had never heard of the Lambs Club. I didn't know the Lambs Club. I knew who the previous chef was who had started it, everything like that. And I was on a different path at the time. I was supposed to do a pretty big new opening for a pretty big group, and it got postponed because there were some financial issues within two families arguing over this particular property. I won't name the property, but it's a pretty iconic place. And I was sort of like a mercenary gun for hire with this group, came in, and then Chris and I met. And even though we'd never actually met each other, like we spoke the same language, and you could just tell immediately that we had the same vision, principles, standards, care for hospitality, but also care for quality. And, it's really easy when you find somebody who you're so aligned with in the vision of something, because then the rest of it's just figuring out how to do it. Right. And this building is built in 1905. It's one of the most iconic buildings in New York City. It was built by Stanford White, who was a super renowned and slightly notorious architect back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But he built the original Madison Square Garden. He built the Washington Square Arch, the first building in Times Square. And this building was actually his last ever commissioned building in 1905. And it was commissioned by Charles Lamb to build something that was supposed to be a place that was a haven and for all the entertainers of Broadway and the actors and actresses of Broadway. It was a club that had come from Soho, London, that they were trying to bring to New York. It was when Broadway was kind of just first starting out. And the idea was supposed to be that when they were done with their day of entertaining the rest of the world, this would be a place where they would feel safe and feel entertained and feel loved. And I think that like ethos, like you walk into this building and you just feel that. You feel old school New York, but you also feel that true level of wanting to bring hospitality at its finest, terms, which is really to take care of people, right? And the second that we both felt that, there was a little opportunity where the group that had taken over wasn't quite working out so well. And, Chris and I sort of were like, let's just do this.
Yeah.
Like, let's build what we want to build.
Yeah.
And, we sat down, we talked about it, we committed, we, built business plans for it, proposed them, and got the gig, as they say.
Yeah.
For you.
So
Wow.
what has changed over the years then, and what has remained really steady throughout it? Because I would imagine that the guests that you're seeing, some of them want the same experience that they've had or that they're used to, and then you've got something new as well, I would imagine, or a new clientele that you're trying to cater to, especially post-pandemic. I know a lot has changed there as well. Technology decisions can make or break a restaurant. That's why restaurants turn to Back of House, your guide to smarter tech strategy. From point-of-sale systems to online ordering, labor tools, and guest engagement platforms, Back of House helps you cut through the noise with expert insights, comparisons, and best practices. Don't just buy tech, build a strategy that grows your business. Visit backofhouse.io and get the clarity you need to choose the right tools for your restaurant.
Yeah, no, that's actually a super keen observation because, whenever you're taking over an iconic property in any capacity, you don't want to change everything, right?
Right.
Because there are things that have been working, there are things that people do gravitate towards, and there's also things you should honor and truly believe to continue on that tradition in certain ways. And there's also opportunities, to be honest with you, to improve. Right? And so we kind of had to be very clear. So the first thing we did was actually create a motto, a mantra, whatever you want to call it. Like, what is this? Like, what are we doing? And we
Mhm.
kind of came down to a pretty simple sentence, which is elevated and fun takes on American classics from a New Yorker's lens. And it was sort of like, if we can filter the food, the cocktails, the service, everything sort of like into that little filter, if it like fits into that mold, then no matter what we do, we'll at least there'll be a story to it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I am from New York, born and raised. Chris is from right across the pond. Like, we know this place in terms of the hospitality, and we wanted to honor those traditions, but also, again, make it elevated, make it fun, make it like exciting, make it something that's a little bit more refreshing and not stuffy. We're like, I feel like a grandfather to like the people that actually work for us because like, we're like the young old folks in the room.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like in terms of hospitality, we've both been doing this for 20 plus years and 1, 2, and 3 Michelin star restaurants in the city. And it's sort of like, we know we got to learn from the best. We worked, like I was the youngest kid in Danielle in that kitchen when we got 3 Michelin stars and we're the 8th best restaurant in the world. And every single one of the other 22 chefs in that kitchen has gone on to be a successful chef and owner and entrepreneur and something like that. And so I got to learn from people who truly were the best at the time, right? And so now it's like passing that forward, paying that forward, and also reminding ourselves that we are still youngish Chris just had a baby, so maybe he's a little bit, more
Congratulations.
responsible as a father.
I feel like as a
Um,
millennial working with anyone Gen Z or younger,
yeah,
it like
it's
ages you an additional 30 years. I feel very old. I don't know what
it
half the
really
sayings mean.
it
So,
really does. Yeah, it's very different.
yeah.
But it was also about having that like experience, but still youthful hospitality. Smile, service with a smile, care, the food as well. Like, if you come to the Lambs Club, we want you to feel like you were taken care of and you had fun. And there should be a smile on your face when you leave.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I like how you have that vision. That I think that's great advice for any restaurant operator, anybody. You've got that guiding light, that vision. What are we trying to do here? And then every decision we make has to roll back up to that overall statement of what is the atmosphere, what is the food, and everything you make has to roll back up to this is what we're trying to do. And I think you've got it well defined. And I don't know, did that take you a while to come up with, like, this is how we're going, or was it right away like we know the vision for this?
It was pretty early on, I think, right, Chris? Like, I think Chris and I were very aligned with it. But I'll be honest, there are certain times where we'll put up something on the menu, or one of the chef de cuisines or something like has an idea, and like we want to run with it because I'm really big about fostering and nurturing creativity and things like that. And then you kind of look back and you're like, wait a second, like this doesn't really actually fit into that funnel. It helps us realize like what isn't necessary right for the restaurant, because we can always come back to that standard that we set on day one, which is like, this is what it's going to be. And I think it actually helps the mistakes more than it actually pushes forward the good things, right? Because the good things are always going to be great because they're aligned and it makes sense and it works. But I think it actually helps us filter things out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, it gives you like a box within to work, and, when you see yourself tiptoeing around the edges of the box, and then, you catch yourself when you're veering off into the ether,
Right.
directly outside of the box. And, the other thing I think, which is important to speak about, is how we just want to build a restaurant that we would want to go to. You know, I am like very big on, getting value. We just want people to feel like they get good value. You go to the restaurants all the time. I used to go a lot more before the baby, but I would go out and I would take my wife out, and there's like a really good $500 meal, and there's a, oh my God, what did I just spend $500 on?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what it costs to go out to dinner in New York City. If you want to have a bottle of wine and, entree, dessert, cocktail, that's the going rate. So it's like, people are working really hard these days. They want to have, they want to feel valued. And it's like, is this worth it? And that's what we want to make sure, that the people that come into the restaurant, the people that come to the Lambs Club are like, wow, you know what? I might have spent a lot of money there, but it was great. I felt like I was taken care of, and I want to come back.
Yeah. Oh, and so many people on this show talk about the experience and how much time that they're putting into now about this restaurant experience. And I think that, sometimes we talk about it in the way of pop-ups, which I do want to get to your pop-up here in a second. But
Yeah.
I think it's also about, though, just the idea of the entire restaurant experience. And as you said before, the hospitality, the food, everything that weaves into it and what makes that experience special. Like, you want to invest money and you want to come back to, you want to tell your friends about, you want to, I don't know, maybe even share it on social media, like some people seem to do these days,
Yeah. Right.
So it's all of it.
No, it is. And it's a cohesive thing. And I think we're both very aligned in what we want the restaurant to be. And it makes it a lot easier when like you have a teammate in the trenches with you. And we get really lucky because we have so many amazing guests who do come back and are loyal. And, the amount of people who it's not their first time at the restaurant, I think that's probably the biggest privilege, because that means you trust us.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and that's what it's all about right there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to talk, Chris, about. We can talk about the wine window, I think, because Claudia hinted at it, so we should probably get into
Yes.
it. But first, I'm always very curious, as someone who enjoys wine but may not be a total expert in all things wine. But for a restaurant operator, for someone who's maybe not obviously a $500 type of ticket in New York City, but has refined enough food to put together a wine list, but doesn't know where to turn, what is your advice for that restaurant operator to say, here's the building blocks for a wine list that's going to get, it's going to please your guests and fit with your overall vision?
You just have to listen to the clientele, really. I mean, we're very into analytics, and, on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, we run a product mix and we see what are people spending. And, it would be foolish for us to just have $300 or $400 or $500 bottles on the list when, the sweet spot for our guests are between $120 and $175,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So that's
Okay.
where most of the list is, and maybe a little bit higher than that. So you can really like upsell a little bit here and there. But, you go to so many restaurants, and it's just frustrating when you go to a list and there's one in a section called white burgundy, which, me and Jack both love. And there's like one bottle of wine at $95. There's one bottle of wine at $130, and then it goes to $210. $295, $400, and then up the ladder. It's like, who is your clientele? And you know what? God bless these restaurants if they're actually getting these people to buy all these like crazy expensive bottles.
Yeah.
But I like to keep it at like incrementally every like $10 or $15 in the really popular sections, because that way you give people options. You could have a dialogue, and that's really important for us to be able to talk to the guests and, hey, what are you looking for? Because, you know, if you're talking white Burgundy, do you want something that's like very, very clean, crisp? Do you want something with a little more oak? Do you want something with a little more age? So if someone wants to spend 130 and there's one bottle at 130, you don't really have an option. So you're really alienating clientele, if you ask me. We're in Times Square. For us to have like a super esoteric wine list probably wouldn't be the best thing for us, right? Like we're not going to get people loving orange wine or, you know, really natural wines. It's just not who we are. So if you're on the Lower East Side and you want to have a natural wine bar, I think that works for you. You know,
I did not expect you to say analytics. That was not what I was asking about the wine list. So that's awesome. Good.
It's all about the data and analytics these days, Spencer.
Chris is also a little modest because he's done a really amazing job curating this list. I mean, we have over 600 labels. We have 2 glasses from Wine Spectator. It's, you know, it's a truly impressive list in New York City. And I think one thing that, again, we're both very aligned on, which makes any decision a lot easier, is we both believe that even for the high level bottles, that like we want people drinking them. Like the point isn't to have it just so you can put it on a piece of paper or keep it in the cellar, or like we want people to experience them and enjoy them and see a smile on their face when they're pairing this amazing, you know, let's say like a Le Fleuve with a perfect scallop dish, and just like, wow, like this is a $1,000 bottle of wine, but it's being enjoyed, and this is actually adding to somebody's experience. So we made a decision early on. For the really expensive wines, we actually have a really low markup compared to those exact same bottles and vintages of other restaurants of our caliber in the city because of that reason. There's no reason to try to make 4 times your money on the really expensive bottles of wine. We don't care about that. We want them to be drunk.
Corporate, you know, restaurant groups, the big groups, they have corporate mandates of what their wine cost has to be at the end of the month. And it's like, we don't have that. And if we sell a bottle of wine that's $1,000 for $2,000, although that's a 50% wine cost, we just put $1,000 in the bank. So that's more important to us, you know, as restaurateurs, that people are getting a good experience and not getting robbed.
Yeah.
Right.
Quick question. Are most of your customers repeat, or because you're in Times Square, are most of them new?
So we have a ton of repeat guests. And the reality is, even though we are in Times Square, we're also in Central Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of our guests are Broadway theater goers, and we're very lucky and privileged to have a lot of loyal guests who do view us as the best meal to have free theater. You know, earlier on in this conversation, we kind of were talking about the restaurant and, you know, the vision and, you know, what's changed and what we're trying to do. And I think the biggest thing that we've been trying to do and now are getting more and more successful at doing is changing the concept of the Lambs Club being the best pre-theater restaurant in, you know, in the area or the city to just being the best restaurant, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of been like our mission has been to like to trudge through that, you know, where it's not just because people are coming there for the theater, they actually want to come because it's just a great experience.
Yeah.
And then we do also now see a lot of guests who come that aren't going to a show, right? They're coming for the experience, and it's you know, that's very gratifying as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. How has the food evolved?
Going from that little mantra right there, you know,
Yeah.
elevated and fun takes on American classics, right? But from a New Yorker's lens, it gives you a lot. It gives you a lot of freedom when you think about it. It's a short sentence, but you know, what is a New Yorker's lens? There's 1,000 different neighborhoods and different like walks of
Yeah.
life and different cuisines. So it's really been more of trying to channel some of my personal journey as a chef. I started, like I said, in Italy when I was 18 because I needed to learn how to cook, and because at the time, I think I was smart enough to think that if I wanted to own restaurants, how was I ever going to do that if I didn't know how to, you know, to make the food? And I kind of went down a rabbit hole from that moment, sort of like a movie type of environment where, you know, normal people don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I would have the courage to do that now, but luckily at 18, you don't think about, you know,
It's the beauty of being young.
This can't be a bad.
Yeah,
right,
young and reckless.
Right. And so after I came back from Italy, I sort of wanted to veer towards French cuisine. So I worked at Danielle for 4.5 years. We were a 3 Michelin star restaurant. Like it was sort of like I'd done Italian. Now I wanted to learn, be in the French military, if you will. And that's sort of what it felt like over there. And then after that, I was ready to kind of move on. And Danielle actually got me a job at this amazing restaurant in Sydney, Australia. So I spent 2 years in Australia, working in one of the top restaurants in the country there. And then coming back to New York, finally worked at a place called Bettany. And it's sort of like, 10 years went by in a blink of an eye, but you also realize like how much you've accumulated from all the people, from all the cultures, from all the different places. And then moved to Tokyo for about a year. learned a whole lot there. And so it was sort of like I had taken all these things, and this is a very long-winded answer to the actual question,
No,
but
this
I
is
will
great.
I will.
These tangents,
Good.
like I'm like, I
I
want a
know.
whole nother episode to hear about the Japan experience,
Exactly.
the Italy
Yeah.
experience. I
Yeah.
mean, no, don't
No,
apologize.
no, and so then I finally come back and I got a job as the executive chef of the Clock Tower, which was a 7-star restaurant in the Edition Hotel, the New York Edition. And Jason Atherton was the chef partner, but he was based out of London. He was a massive restaurateur himself. And so then he flew me out to London, and I went to all of his restaurants, worked there, like talked with him, like tried to learn his style. I was very lucky at every stage to have amazing mentors who wanted me to run the kitchen or be them. So I was able to really get to explore. And finally, when we get to Lamb's Club, look, you can't you're not bringing a sushi bar into Lamb's Club because that's
Right.
just not what the Lamb's Club is. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a tuna tartare that has a yuzu ponzu sauce and has like little hints of different like elements of flavors that end up presenting very Western, but there might be some Eastern ingredients in there. Or there might be like, our pastas are really amazing. We have a fun take on a carbonara, for example, with andouille sausage, and it's spicy. And then we have a poached bacon fat poached egg yolk, and you mix it all up at the table, and it just oozing delicious. But like, it's both not Italian because that's not really like a traditional Italian dish, but it's a Lamb's Club dish,
Yeah, I was
right?
like,
It
but it's
works for
your
it.
dish. It's your
Yeah,
special
it
thing.
works for the
Yeah,
right.
it works for
Like
you.
we have a scallop dish on the menu, which kind of comes from some of my nostalgic memories growing up on the East Coast in the wintertime. My grandma used to make this, amazing clam chowder. My mom would make Campbell's, but my grandma would actually do it properly.
Because every
Yeah.
dish has this long history that no one would ever know, but what makes it so special.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, right? It's food. It's supposed to be delicious, look pretty, and taste good. But there are stories, right? Because you accumulate stories. You pull from places in your life or feelings you've had, or sometimes it's art, sometimes it's you're on the street and you see just like a beautiful blend of colors, and so maybe it's about color. Like there are a lot of times ways that creativity happens, and it's not really just because someone wants to, or at least for me, at least not because you want to come up with the best dish. It's sort of like, what are you pulling from in life?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and how are you expressing that through the medium of food? And so like, there's this white broth that's being, with these green colors, it's bright, the scallops are beautiful. But then when you eat it, if you close your eyes, for me and other people who have asked, like, it feels like you're just eating a bowl of clam chowder in your grandmother's kitchen on
That's
a cold winter's
fantastic.
day. You know what I
Love
mean?
that.
And so
Yeah.
like it actually has
Nostalgia.
something to like, yeah, it brings it back. We have a lot of fun snack bites that are all about, playing with children's food. We have a foie gras peanut butter and jelly. We have a everything
Huh.
bagel smoked salmon cones that are just like eating an everything bagel and lox. Like, we do like a little play on a little pizza with, it's just like a mozzarella mousse with a spicy, pizza powder on top of a little crispy thing. But when you eat it, it's like, oh, it's a little pizza bite. We made
That's
our own
awesome.
hot pockets at one point. Chris loves hot pockets. I love hot
Love
pockets.
Hot
He's like, wow.
Pockets.
He's like, why don't we make we made we had a Philly cheesesteak hot
Gourmet.
pocket.
Gourmet
like, why
hot
not?
pocket. Who would
Yeah.
have known? Dang.
Chris is just
Yeah,
preparing himself for fatherhood here. He's got young kids. It's going to be hot pockets all over the place.
Yeah,
and peanut butter and
exactly.
Mom
jam.
will not
Yeah.
allow that. Don't worry.
Right. No, it's all about having fun. Again, that it has to be that. We've dedicated our lives to this industry, and so many people do in this industry, in any profession. We're very honest people. We look at ourselves in the mirror or at each other, and like, but at the same time, it should be fun. Like, that's the point, right? Like,
That's why we do what we do.
yeah.
Exactly. So I know we started talking about the wine and I think it kind of ties everything together here. Talked about the wine, doing new things, and then being close to Times Square. So the wine window, let's discuss that, because you've got, maybe just explain what is a wine window, what is this tradition, where does it come from, and what have you built in Times Square that I think is so fun and exciting, and I guess maybe what's the feedback on it so far?
The idea with the wine window actually started. I was on my honeymoon in Florence. My wife makes all the itineraries when we go on vacation. So, I like looking through it. And
I'm
don't really
laughing
pay too
because
much
I'm like,
attention.
I'm not shocked.
Yeah, no,
It's
Leave it
She's
to
a
the woman.
publicist, so it's like
Oh, that
by the
works great.
minute.
Yeah.
It's like by the minute what's going on. And
The
it's like, you have to be
itinerary
here,
is
you have to be here, you have to be here.
Boom,
I'm like,
boom,
did you
boom.
leave any time to just like chill? And of course not. So, so one day we go and I was like, okay, what are we doing next? She's like, oh, we're going to go to the wine windows. I was like, oh, what's that? She's like, oh, it's this thing on TikTok. And this was, coming off of COVID, and there was a resurgence in these things. Jack, why don't you tell the history of the wine windows? You're a good storyteller, so you
Sure.
tell the story of the history.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like when Chris did come up with this idea of having the wine window, it was sort of like, again, it was one of those things, just like when we met the first time, it was like, it just clicked. It was sort of like, yes, like that's what we're going to do. And the wine windows basically, they were an old tradition in the late 1400s, 1500s is around when they started, where a lot of wealthy people who had access to amazing wines, they had these cellars, they would actually build windows into their homes, usually close to the street level, where they could either sell their wine out of their cellar or sometimes just give their wine to passersby. People would just gather on the streets, and they were able to just kind of create this wine culture in the 1500s in Florence, Italy, and basically in the Tuscan region. And then during the plague, they were used to actually help people. So to give vinegars or medicines and things like that, so that there was like a no contact element as well. So fast forward to the plague of COVID, right? They got this resurgence because at that time, it was a way of having no contact. So people could drink, they could have their wines, they were able to social distance or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
And,
makes sense.
but these things had been built into these homes for 500 years. They existed, and there was sort of like this resurgence of the purpose
And
of the
there's
why.
little doors, right? There's little doors, and you kind of knock on them, and a wine
Yeah, I
glass
mean,
comes out. That's what I'm envisioning.
basically that. Some of them have bells, some of them are a little bit more ornate. And so when Chris had the idea to do this, it went from, okay, cool, wine window in New York City, to like, okay, we're going to build a wine window in the middle of Times Square. How the do we do that? Let's do it. So
It was the end of August, and obviously, in New York City, it's like not the best month. So, I'm walking through Times Square, and there's this like, little beer garden. I've never stopped there in my entire time going through Times Square, and I walk past it every day. And I'm like, man, what is this? I was like, this thing probably makes so much money. It's no labor, and they're probably like printing money. And I was like, why don't we put a wine window there? So then it's like, okay, how do we do this? So like, what's the steps? And so I called the guy from the Times Square Alliance, and I was like, hey, what's the deal with this? Like, how do we get this space or something like it? And he's like, well, actually, there's a bid up right now. There's an RFP. So I was like, okay. So I go to Jack. I was like,
wow, what timing?
This is what we're going to do. So we met an architect and a designer, and we decided we would do it on shipping containers. So it has to be able to be removed for New Year's Eve, because it's right where it's essentially 200 yards from where the ball drops. So I think there was about 30 people that submitted bids for this. We won the bid. And that was like mid-December, right?
Yep.
My wife's 8 months pregnant. So I'm like, okay, it's our busiest season, So we're like, okay, let's get the ball rolling. I still don't know how we actually pulled this off, but we did.
And it's been successful.
Yeah,
it's great. Honestly,
it's gone very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does it work? What do I, if I'm showing up at Times Square and I want a glass of wine, what do I do?
Yeah, don't knock on the wrong door, Spencer. Yeah, we have to know what door to knock on.
It's like a full like counter service, like fast casual. And you go up, you order. If you want food, we have, pasta. There's a couple of paninis, salads, gelato, coffee, and of course wine. All the wines from Tuscany. We partnered with Antinori, the oldest house in Tuscany in Florence. Actually, is where they're based. So we have 3 white wines, 3 red wines, a rosé, a sparkling wine, and the wine comes out through a window, and everyone takes a selfie. Wow. Everyone gets a picture, and it's like, I knew that we had to do something that was social media focused, because it's just the way the world is right now.
Absolutely.
So, I think it's a home run, and I think, this is the first of hopefully many.
We were able to bring Tuscany to Times Square, and it's a cool feeling. And I think the most rewarding thing, I say this a lot, but when you see the joy on people's faces, they're at the window, they're getting their wine or their spritz or their beer, or like their Peroni through the window, taking their video, taking their selfie. Like, you have Times Square in the background. And I think the best compliment that I've gotten personally from it are people who just sit down and they're like, wow, like I feel like I'm in Italy right now. And then I look around me and I'm in the middle of like the busiest place in the entire world. And it just doesn't feel like that. Like when I'm just sitting right here, and it's just like that's what we were. That's it. Like, that's what we were going for. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, oh, okay. I think maybe we succeeded here.
I'd say so. So, last question here. Let's say you're both off duty, no pressure, no guests. What's the one meal and drink you'd make for each other?
Oh, I thought you were gonna say golf. Chris and I golf a lot together.
Nice.
You could take it in that direction if you
You can take
want.
that, yeah. Are you a hot dog at the turn?
Yeah.
Is that the guilty pleasure? Is that
Exactly.
I love a hot dog at the turn.
This is a choose your own adventure kind of show.
Yeah, that's fair. No, when we spend a lot of time together, and we do cook a lot of times together. Chris has got a nice grill at his apartment over there, so I'll come over. We've made some fun steaks. Chris makes a really mean spicy rigatoni. He's got the spicy rig game. There's always good wine around. The wine's always fun. So,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris? What do you think?
I see his seamless orders and his late night orders. He's either like diner at 2:00 in the morning or something from Chinatown.
Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah,
full on.
that's true.
I'm just a carnivore. I eat steak like 5 times a week. Like, I'm sure my doctor hates me, but my cholesterol's been in check though.
That's good. I was wondering I was like, this something here explains the pizza bites.
Right.
Well, it was great having both of you on today and learning about the Lambs Club and the wine window and your incredible story. And I wish you all the continued success.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'd love to have you out as well.
Yeah,
I'd love to try it.
100%. I'd love to be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds great.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much. So You Want to Run a Restaurant is created by Back of House, produced and hosted by Claudia Sarek, with Nick Florick as executive producer. Marketing by Hillary Young and Ashley Dunn. Creative by Manisha Kishinchan. And live production by Sarah Heemstra. And of course me, your co-host, Spencer Michael. For more information, visit backofhouse.io/podcast.